Here, ostensibly the main event in this package of games. Well, this game with its three scenarios, which is Almeida and Bussaco. Fresh off of Almeida, which was a bit underwhelming, we are going to be playing Bussaco, which is on the back side of the map. It is a, I guess you'd call this a half-size map sheet in wargame terms. It's 4A4 pieces of paper, but it's full size in the sense that it's the full map sheet that comes with the game. It is the French versus the Anglo-Portuguese all along the Sierra de Bussaco here. And this battle was fought in September of 1810 in the Peninsular Campaign, and featured the one and only Duke of Wellington, who is here, and whose stats are incredible, frankly. He can put 5 units in his command range into command each turn, which is higher than I've ever seen in this system. Facing off against Massena over here, and then some French units down here. So here we've got the 2nd Corps under Renier, and here we've got the 6th Corps under Marshal Ney. And historically, the French tried to take this hill, which was 1,500 feet, so no joke in terms of elevation gain, and tried to push the British and their Portuguese troops off and away. I think the French thought that they were fighting a much smaller force, but Wellington had everyone set up in kind of a reverse slope defense. And as you can see, there's plenty of cannon in this scenario. So this is a large scenario, but it's only 7 turns. There are a lot of chits in the cup every turn, so the turns may take a while, but it's going to be a huge conflagration of gunfire. I'm excited to play this and see how it goes. I feel like there's going to be a lot more opportunity for dynamic events to happen. This is the historical setup, and something I did mention in the description of the last video is that each of these scenarios does also come with a historical sort of counterfactual what-if scenario that may be a little more balanced if you're playing head-to-head, and includes like reinforcements that could have been in the battle but weren't, or add some reinforcements to one side or another. So we're going to get this underway. You know the deal by now. This is a regimental scale Napoleonic system, and we are going to be playing from the 7 a.m. to the 5:30 p.m. turn. Turns in this game are 2 hours and 15 minutes. 1 hour and 15 minutes. So it's a little bit different time scale than the last game, but should be a good time. And we're just going to kick into it. I should mention also, victory points in this scenario are all the standard ways: demoralizing formations, eliminating units. The French, if they can take this hex, I believe, get some bonus victory points. That's going to be a tall order to get up there. But then also, there are these reserve units that both sides have. Most of the Anglo-Portuguese are down here along this end of the ridge. The French have some kind of mixed in back here with the 6th Corps. Their activation shits don't go in the cup unless the side that controls them puts them in the cup. But if they do it, it does give the opposing side victory points. So you can see here that prior to turn 5, or maybe it's prior to turn 6, if any of these chits go into the cup for a turn, I will give the other side a number of victory points. And then the French have a couple formations as well that can happen with. So we'll have to see how the battle goes. You know, will a side want to use those victory points? We'll use those formations and potentially give up victory points. I think it's going to be one of those things that a couple turns into the game, one side or the other may feel like, okay, if I'm going to win this, I have to do that. So it makes for a kind of an interesting sort of twist on sort of the manpower you have available, because some of these formations aren't going to be moving at all until one side or another decides to do that. I do think the Anglo-Portuguese have a better opportunity to put their formations to use, because as these units come up this way, they can flank the French into the left, and that might be, you know, just what the doctor ordered depending on when they come in. So we are set up with the Battle of Bussaco, September 27th, 1810. Let's roll. Okay, first turn down, first hour and 15 minutes of fighting, and it's been actually turn went quicker than I thought it would. A lot of the English, British, and Portuguese units don't really particularly want to move too much. They just really want to hold their defensive ground. I actually think the French did quite well on that turn. Despite all the disorders you see in here, all of these units with the white stripe across them were disordered by either attacking or artillery fire. So, you know, that first wave going in, but they did manage to push the Anglo-Portuguese back pretty far, push them off sort of their starting positions. The one area that I think the French are in kind of some trouble here is right in here, where counterattack by some Portuguese units managed to really crush this artillery and the infantry with it and separate this formation. These guys are going to be in real trouble if the Portuguese get to go first. But the French are going to try and continue to push. They're trying to get to that hex with the blue marker in it. They've got a lot of defenses to overcome. We did get a few successful rallies. Some of these units back here is the French reserve. They're not going to activate until those chits get added to the game. Same down here. The story of the first turn, I would say, is that British artillery was extremely ineffectual. A lot of point-blank shots that just had no impact on the French attackers, except up here where where Bull's artillery right here managed to disorder almost the entirety of Mermet's division as they tried to take that crest, that ridge line. So what's interesting about that is that formation right here on the extreme left flank, they're also one of the reserve formations, but if they're going to be attacked, they do get a chance to reaction fire, at least the artillery does, and it was extremely effective. So it's kind of funneled the French into this like killing box here. We're going to see what happens on turn 2. We've got a lot more guns still intact and still working for the English, and they're going to be at point-blank range. So we'll see if we can convert some of those rolls to disorders or possibly routes. One lone Portuguese unit routing off this way from this French assault here. They rolled dynamite on that one. And then it's pretty inconclusive down here in the sort of southern end of the battlefield. The French trying to push the hill, trying to find an advantage where they can get it. Wellington moved down to put this formation in command next turn so that they can perhaps counterattack, but you can see that we've got some cavalry on the front, and the extreme French left kind of screening that. They don't want to get charged from the rear. So see how it goes. Going to play through another one, and we'll see. It feels very up in the air right now. It feels French made some good gains. They took some losses doing it. The British have still the position advantage, and we're going to be able to use our special chits like the rifles for the Portuguese and also the French sub-commander chits. So we'll see what happens. All right, end of the second turn of the game, but the third turn in terms of like a time track. French making extremely significant gains towards the northern end of the ridge. Story of the game so far. Anglo-Portuguese artillery has been unable to hit absolutely anything. I must have rolled probably close to 15 times for artillery shots in that turn, and not a single one hit. It was insane. I'm beginning to think the die that I'm using for the Anglo-Portuguese is cursed. And on top of that, all of the French made every single rally roll that they took throughout the entire turn. So it's becoming increasingly one-sided due to some really swingy dice luck, or a run of luck, I should say, which is really frustrating as the Anglo-Portuguese because they still hold the ground and they just can't get anything to... It's like fighting robots. They just keep coming and they don't seem to show any weakness or injury. So the French are doing pretty good. They've pushed, especially here, Loisin has pushed back the Anglo-Portuguese defenders around that key hex around the walls here of this convent, I guess it is. They're just going to continue to pound away. There was a counterattack executed here that eventually got blunted out. The Portuguese soldiers ended up becoming disordered in some of their attacks, but we did strike and pick off some of the French artillery that was on this hill, which is good. And then next turn, if they can go first, they can actually potentially grab this artillery as well. That's Marchand's artillery. So the French may have overextended here. If we can get some timely rally rolls, that's the most dangerous formation that the Anglo-Portuguese have right now. And Wellington is keeping a close eye on it to make sure that they're in command every turn. As we go further south, Renier made a huge charge up the hill, pushing off an entire division of Portuguese soldiers, I believe, routing one of them back to Casemis. And it's getting really ugly for the Allies. The French have the unit quality advantage, but I guess the Anglo-Portuguese are hoping that the terrain would hold up a little bit better. Still very chaotic, but when you can't score any hits on your rifles chit because the French are just able to pass cohesion tests or rally checks, it's going to be a really short defense. The one thing I'm noticing about this is that I really wish leaders command stuff had more of an impact on the game. Yeah, I can put five formations in command, but when I'm really playing a defensive game where I want to hold ground, that doesn't actually mean anything. I don't need to put anyone in command if I'm just going to stand there and try and force the French to bloody themselves on me. So it doesn't feel like Wellington is having a huge impact on the battle beyond sort of the initial setup. But, I knew that going in. The leadership in this game is not a huge factor in the gameplay. It's much more about unit quality, and the French have the advantage in that regard. Well, it's been just more good news for the French. They continue to roll lights out, and the battle is really becoming unbalanced at this point with how well the French are rolling and how badly the Anglo-Portuguese are rolling. It's kind of ruining what I thought would be a fun contested experience a little bit, just because of how lucky they've been. But like you can see here, the French have just completely routed an entire formation on the top of the hill. It's not looking like that's going to be recoverable in any meaningful fashion before the game is over. We've got French approaching Wellington's command post up here. Some artillery is still holding out. We did manage to disorder this unit. But the rest of the French advance has basically taken the first line of defensive positions, and it doesn't look like they're going to be slowing down at any point. They've actually separated the Portuguese left flank from the rest of the army. I did choose, as the Anglo-Portuguese, to bring this formation into play this turn. That is going to cost me 2 points, which is, unfortunate, but it is a necessity. These units will be useful in counterattacking here. French are probably not going to get into the convent, given the walls around it, but if they keep pushing, they can probably force this blue formation back to get to those sweet victory points on the north end of the map. Again, more routed and disordered units here, so... I mean, if you just take a look, if you scrub back through the video and look at how we set up versus where we are now, the French push has been really cataclysmic. Way better than I thought they were going to get, but that's what happens with hot dice, I suppose. I think I'd be really frustrated if this was a face-to-face game and I was playing the British, because it feels like it should not go this way. But I guess sometimes armies don't show up on the day of battle like you would expect. So we are in the 12:15 turn, so we're about lunchtime, and the French are looking to make a snack of the Portuguese. Well, that midday turn, the Anglo-Portuguese definitely got the better of the French there. It finally started to pay dividends with this point-blank artillery canister range here at the convent, blasting away a bunch of units that the French were trying to move up in this direction. Fortunately, Mermet, the orange division here, has made great gains. They've been unstoppable, pushed the Portuguese back, and they're about to surround that key location there north of the convent. Couldn't do much with Cole over here. He did try and maneuver for an attack, but they were out of command, obviously. I have moved Wellington up to the convent to try and do something about the command range for some of these formations who, some of them have started to rally. You can see the blue, the independents, the Portuguese. They have rallied for the most part, which is good news. They can get back into position to defend, and the French have kind of stalled out here in the north. They don't have a lot of fresh units, and the fresh units they do have are facing sort of not great attacks, other than Mermet. That might change, depending on who activates first here. But I did make the decision, since the Portuguese have spent so many points already on new formations entering, we're going to bring in Clausel, who is the purple formation here behind Messina. We did put both of their chits in the cup. That's 2 points to the Anglo-Portuguese. And they're going to form the second wave of this attack, hopefully. Hopefully take a position where they can do some damage. We also had some eliminations. The 95th Rifles here on the final Rifles chit of the game actually just straight out eliminated a regiment from the top of those heights. That really put a hole in the French line and has allowed kind of this salient to kind of collapse a little bit. Unfortunately, the Anglo-Portuguese have been unlucky in the last couple of turns. They have been the last chit in the cup, meaning some of their formations have only activated once, including here. This purple one, they only got to activate one time last turn, which is unfortunate because there's an opportunity here to maybe push down against Mer. A bunch more routing units here. You can see the French have really put the hurt on, although we do have some French routes as well. And then the French have really cleaned up the center of the battlefield, have taken the ridge, getting ready to try and wipe out sort of the resistance here on their left flank. We had a couple of cavalry charges that were inconclusive. One of these units went into square, this one, and this one ended up routing, actually, one of those cavalry units. So a little bit of danger. Soult's cavalry has not been super effective, despite the fact that they've had positional advantage both of the times that they've charged. And we did decide to bring in this formation down here, the red one. This is, let's see if I can find the chit. What's their name? They're British, with some Portuguese artillery. This is Hill. So we decided to put both chits for Hill into the cup. That gave the French 2 more points. But I think if we can get both of those chits off, we can bring them up to hopefully hit the French left flank before the game is over. We're trying to cause eliminations here. It's actually pretty close in terms of points right now, at least on unit casualties. You can see a bunch of the British artillery are gone, but the French have also sustained some casualties, and they're only leading by 3 right now. So if we can cause some more casualties by the end of the game, especially some of these disordered units, if they're not able to rally, which is unlikely, but maybe we can squeak out a victory here. So it's not over yet by any means, and we've got 1, 2, 3 turns to go. French exploiting their breakthrough to the north of the convent. They've punched through the Anglo-Portuguese line, and the second wave is taking up position. That's Clausel. They're going to just try and sweep around this direction where, I forget the orange formation, Mermet, where Mermet has already done some great work in pushing back the Allies. And, if they can get that loop around here, they can really put some pressure on and force Wellington's troops back to the south. Of note, they still have not captured this hex just because of zones of control and whatnot, but they should be able to do it this turn. Elsewhere, the Anglo-Portuguese have rallied a bit in the center. Going to try and figure out a way to counterattack there. If we can shove this flank of the French that way, maybe we can halt the advance to the north there, or at least make command more troublesome. I don't think either side is interested in putting more chits in the cup. Portuguese can't afford to give up more VPs, and the French don't really need it. Although, as we move further south, you can see that this light green formation, I forget what it is named, has been kind of disrupted in terms of what they were trying to do. They've been scattered. We got a unit who routed into this village here. So there's really nothing in the center. And then on the extreme left, all of these forces, because Massena's up north, are out of command. So when they attack, they have to roll to see if they can attack. And they just haven't been getting them. So it's been kind of a stalemate down here. Anglo-Portuguese have not been able to rally their forces. A lot of people taking cover in villages. Artillery fire is ineffective. However, Hill did get a couple activations this turn. He took one at half movement, and then he rolled for a full activation, which he got. So he was able to get his artillery up and move his infantry in. And we're going to see if those guys can have an effect this turn. Soult's cavalry is keeping an eye on him here, but they're not really going to be able to do much to stop them. So we might see a clash down here potentially in the final 2 turns of the game that could potentially decide it with VPs if we can get some good rolls. But again, the French rolling really well again this turn. The Allies sort of middling, and you can see that the battle is not going too well. Casualties over here. Another casualty, another French cavalry casualty this turn, but pretty small, mostly artillery. And I think given the amount of routed units on the board, if the Anglo-Portuguese can't clean that up, they're probably going to lose. It's turned into a chaotic mess up around the convent. Just so much stuff happening in kind of a chaotic, disordered fashion. The French did manage to break into the convent here. It looks like they're in sort of the church. And the main buildings, surrounded by Portuguese units. The Anglo-Portuguese actually rallied this turn quite effectively, but they are losing ground. They started along this ridge, and now they've been pushed back on their north flank, and Clausel was moving up to kind of surround the northern end of the convent to try and force the British into bad defensive positions, and they did do that, and they did capture that victory point hex, but this unit, these Portuguese brigade here, the KGL, they were disordered in Santa Eufemia. They rallied, and then on their next activation, they charged out of the town down this slope, and they ended up disordering and routing significant portions of Clausel's division before they could get into position to launch their attack, which was spectacular to watch. Really, I think this is probably the British's best unit. It has a cohesion of 6 on the front side, so it's really hard to disorder. It's very powerful in terms of strength points, and it just absolutely wrecked the French plan in the north. Now, the French did manage to sort of, this should be like facing this way. The French did manage to kind of like regroup a little bit, and Mermet's division did manage to cause some serious losses on the French units over here. Cole's formation, they're actually totally eliminated. There is no more Cole in this game. And units were like routing back and forth past each other. It was just an absolute maelstrom of chaos. A lot more British casualties this turn. I think they lost 3 or 4 more units to the French, so it's slowly putting victory out of reach for them, I think. The French are like in a pretty good position, although they do have to be careful because Spencer rallied most of his units and is now in a position to kind of like charge the flank and maybe get into the French's rear if they can get some good results on their combat. It's going to be kind of throw everything at the wall and see where it sticks. I think the French are going to give up a victory point by bringing in, who is this, Soulagnac? Yeah, Soulagnac this turn, just to kind of shore up this flank here, this reserve force. It's kind of what they're for. Further down, we've had some more Anglo-Portuguese rallies. We've had some skirmishing down on the south end of the battlefield. Nothing too interesting happening. Hill trying to get into position to attack, but nothing really happening there. It's tough when you're at a command to get a full activation and pass your attack reluctance rolls or whatever they're called. So that's where we stand going into the final turn, and we are almost done. This has actually been quite fun. Way less maneuver heavy than some of the other battles I played, but certainly there's a lot happening every turn with the number of chits that are being drawn from the cup. So it's engaging. The Battle of Bussaco comes to an exhausting, feels like an inconclusive end, although after I did the victory points, the French had a runaway victory. It was a 31-15 in terms of final victory points. A lot of that having to do with, on the final turn, the 22nd line there under Clausel managed to take that key hex north of the convent. Both armies on the final turn managed to get into some sort of order. You can see here, it's a little more chaotic than it was during most of the turn, but a lot of rallying, getting back into formation, sort of this crescent French positioning here, the Anglo-Portuguese trying to surround them. We did kick the French out of the convent on the final turn, but the push against the left flank here really stopped Spencer from being able to cause much damage. And, the Solignac formation here didn't really do much at the end of the game. They just kind of moved closer. So that ended up being kind of inconclusive. It seemed to devolve into a bit of a stalemate once kind of the chaos was over and the position solidified. I don't know that either side was going to be able to take more ground here than they already did, but credit to the French and Massena's direction for storming over that ridge and essentially partially surrounding the main defensive fortifications that Wellington had set up there. A lot of Anglo-Portuguese units are still in the middle of routing or routed into a town where they sort of freeze until they can rally. We did have a successful counterattack finally here after some rallying in these 2 nearby villages to drive Merle's formation from the ridge. That could have developed into something had the battle continued. And then this was, again, another stalemate down here. Hill and the Portuguese facing off against Hudley, and without being in complete command, not much action, having to trying to roll for full activation so they could get the best attacks possible and failing each side once. So the Battle of Bussaco is over. It was fun. I like this scenario a lot. I can see this one being a really good 2-player scenario. It's a lot more static than the other one, so you're going to be doing a lot of dice rolling and just kind of pushing combat back and forth, but the situation is quite interesting, and maybe there's a better way for me to use Wellington's command advantage. Perhaps if I played this again with the Anglo-Portuguese, those 5 formations you can put into command each turn should have been able to be a little bit more, dynamic with what they were doing. But it becomes hard when the French, the French get the first activation of the game and they charge up the hill and kind of lock a lot of those units in place, and you don't want to give up the good ground that you have, so you kind of leave them there, and it's just kind of a stalemate. Actually, on the final turn, that you could feel the exhaustion of the battle, because on the final turn, a lot of formations didn't even bother with attacking. When you're attacking with no modifiers, it's just a flat roll, and you're going to count up victory points. You don't really want to sacrifice a unit that might potentially get routed on a horrible roll. So a lot of the formations didn't actually even engage in combat. They just kind of stood off against each other. There was some artillery fire, but most of it was ineffective. So this is a cool one. I think this battle alone is probably worth it if you can find a copy of this Almeida and Bussaco game. It is out of print, has been out of print for about 15 years, or well, maybe a little less. But this battle is really cool. This is one of my favorite battles so far that I've played in this system, and I think it's pretty interesting. It doesn't outstay its welcome, but there's a lot happening every turn, and some interesting like how it plays out, which is cool. It's not just a static push and pulse, across the line. You get some movement, some advances and whatnot. And I think it really exemplifies the advantages that this system has versus some of its competitors. So we have got one more to do out of this. We're going to do the battle, the next battle, the last one. It's a small one. It's only 6 turns, and it's got probably like a quarter of the number of units or formations as this one. So it should be quick. That'll be another fast video, and then we're moving on to something else. Thanks for watching.